What if the person you love the most was quietly rewriting your reality? Narcissistic abuse is more than manipulation. It's a war for your mind, heart, and soul. Today, we break the silence and reclaim our power. Are you tired of the bull? Welcome to the Matadoras No More Bull podcast. I'm Lizzie, and with me is Dina. We're the co-founders, and our mission is to empower women to recognize toxic relationships, escape safely, and heal. Today on the podcast, we're thrilled to welcome back a guest whose wisdom and compassion left a lasting impact. Katherine Miura, LMFT, is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Los Angeles with over 16 years of experience supporting children, adolescents, couples, and families, many facing deeply challenging circumstances through the Department of Children and Family Services and the Department of Probation. Her insight into healing from trauma, abuse, and the complex relationships continue to bring clarity and hope to so many. She brings not only her clinical expertise, but also a deep empathy, having sat in the client's seat herself. Katherine holds a master's in marriage and family therapy from Fuller Theological Seminary, and her unique journey from the world of advertising to therapy reflects her lifelong curiosity about human nature. In today's conversation, she'll be sharing her perspective on narcissistic abuse, trauma recovery, spiritual concerns, and how real healing begins in the therapeutic relationship itself.
Hello, beautiful audience. Today we are once again hosting Katherine Miura. We are so excited that she's here. Katherine is a LMFT and has a private practice in the LA area. She's also a narcissistic expert because she had several relationships in her life that were narcissistic. And so with her therapy, she really has an inside view on what we are experiencing, which is wonderful and rare. So Katherine, we're so excited to have you here today. And I know today your subject's going to be insights and hope on navigating narcissistic abuse. And take it away. We can't wait to hear all of your insights on what's happening and your upcoming classes that you're going to have.
Thank you. I'm excited too because I'm wrapping up my course that's going to be available online. And so what I'm talking about today is included in that course. So you can get an appetizer today. I wanted to start off with the definition, because I think if you don't have a clear definition of narcissistic abuse, it can go a million different ways and maybe not effectively. So the definition I like is that narcissistic abuse happens when an abuser constructs a false perception of someone else's reality for the purpose of controlling them. So if you look at that definition right away, it's like, wait a second, this person is an illusionist. They're constructing something to control me. What is this? How are they doing it? I love that definition because narcissists are illusionists and they create this reality to confuse the victim, to control the victim. Mostly on the internet, it's about understanding narcissistic behavior. I've learned that it's understanding the narcissist. The narcissist is very broken, very weak. He or she needs the victim to reflect strength and power to them, because if they don't get that, there's nothing there. There's no substance. The survivor, the victim, is actually stronger than the narcissist because the narcissist cannot handle reality. If one little thing, somebody says something, they go into narcissistic rage. And that's because they're so fragile. And the victim thinks, oh, the narcissist, manipulates, does all these things, and I have to learn how they're doing these things. It's like No, you need to understand what exactly is going on and understand that they're constructing things that don't exist. So if you understand the narcissist is really weak and the victim is strong because you can handle reality. If something happens, you get criticized, okay, let's look at myself. Yeah, that's right. I can fix that. The narcissist can't handle any criticism. That's why they go into a rage. That's why they do what they do, because they are really, in truth, like 2-year-olds. They're like a child in an adult's body. So if the survivor realizes that, wow, I'm stronger, really? And, if you leave, you're fighting and you're like, I'm done, I'm leaving, they fall apart. There's nobody to reflect back. That's why I tell my clients nowadays, leave. They can't do anything. And if you think about it, the reason they have a cow when they know you're exiting, it's because they're upset that they're losing a supply and they have to find another one. If you think about that, it's like you leave, they fall apart. So that's why they get so mad. That's why they get so upset. It then it makes you realize, hey, I'm kind of more powerful than I thought. And this is what I'm trying to convey in my course, that you are stronger than you think, and the little steps you take to set boundaries, to say no, they add up. They add up to you growing more self-respect, you having more confidence, you getting yourself back. Because with a narcissist, it's about destroying you, controlling you. And this course is about getting you back. Um, I don't know. Did you guys want to ask a question? I'm
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
No,
Okay.
that's that's awesome, Catherine. And I feel like that's definitely what's needed because, not only do you feel that you're small and they're large, so to speak, but when it is time for you to call it quits because you finally just literally can't take it anymore, they love bomb you and or threaten and scare you. They use these very strong tactics. And
Mm-hmm.
in my case with my ex, he would love bomb me so hardcore that I felt like he was just this sad, broken person that was madly in love with me. And that
Oh,
once he realized the error of his ways, he would now turn and do anything needed to get better and to become the person that I thought I saw. And so it would be weeping and sobbing and begging and pleading
wow.
and doing anything to get me back, which of course made me feel loved.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, I had no clue that the game was I am nothing without you, but in a toxic way, in a manipulative way, in a I need to own you way, not in I love you so much that I can't bear to lose you,
Mm-hmm.
and we can make this work. So you're right. It's a game, and like you said earlier, it's like you're playing checkers, they're playing chess, right?
Right.
There are
That's
these
right.
games being played, and you have no idea what the rules are. You don't
Yep.
even understand the game, and
And
usually you
the,
don't even know it is a game.
right. And the goalpost keeps moving. The rules keep changing. So all the more confusing. That's why I have a chapter and it's called A Clash of Realities. Because to me it's like the victim is wants a relationship. They wanna, reciprocity. They wanna like, let's work this out. And the narcissist comes to it like, I want to get what I want to get. And I want you to stay, and I'm going to control you. And this is what I want, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. So it's like two people with two different realities. And it's like, for the narcissist, this is a game. It is a game to get what they want, and the victim is clueless. And this is partly why I'm doing my course, is because I don't want them to be clueless. I want them to realize, you're stronger than you think. And there's things that you can do to empower yourself, like just realizing that this is a clash of two realities, or just realizing like the narcissist is an illusionist and they're actually weak. They're very weak. That just kind of does a mind shift. I was reading about projection and how the narcissist projects everything they hate about themselves onto you. And then they attack you, so you swallow it and you make it your own. So I've been working with people and say, don't swallow it. Don't internalize it. It's their junk. Leave it at their door. I mean, it's a little subtle shift, but if you can kind of wrap your head around it, and it's like, I'm not swallowing your junk. This isn't me. I'm moving on. I'm getting stronger. This is you and your junk. You can kind of shut the door and, like, ain't my problem, it's yours. And kind of like not refuse to swallow it because they want you to swallow it and wallow in it and feel bad about yourself. But really, it's their junk. So don't accept it. Don't make it your own.
Wouldn't you say also that that is probably why it's really important when you get to that point that you're out and you're done, why it's so important to pretty much cut off all contact so
Yeah.
that,
Uh-huh.
because I think we keep getting, like you said, we get love bombed in or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And so in that case, probably severing everything that you can. Of course, it's difficult when you have children, but there's nothing to do
Yeah,
about that
when
one
you have
except
kids.
maybe emails.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Um, 'Cause that's why I we talked about this before, but doing the inner child work. Because even if you're away from the narcissist, they're in your head. And those negative thoughts, the tapes are still playing. That's why it's important to, again, work on yourself and break that trauma bond. Stand up to the lies, because this listening to the lies keeps you from moving forward, because it's not you, it's his junk, but he implanted it in your head. So it's important to take a stand, say, you know what, these are lies about me, they're not true, and I'm not gonna listen to them. It might take a while for them to kind of fade off, but they'll fade off.
Now, by fade off, do you mean that if you keep reducing your ability to be their supply, they just tend to kind of go on somewhere else? Is that what you mean by fade off?
I think when you really develop a loving relationship with your inner child, is beautiful, because I've seen it a couple times already. It's like you can see that the self-respect is growing in a person. They're starting to see, like, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. They pulled a fast one on me. And they're starting to see the manipulation. And they're starting to say, you know what? No, I'm not having it anymore. Because it's starting to click. And I think, like, we talked about it before. At some point, we all get there where we're done. We're done being mistreated. We're done being manipulated, and something snaps. And I think that's part of becoming a warrior awakened, because we have to reach that point where we won't tolerate abuse anymore.
Yeah, I have a friend who was married to a severe financial abuser and definitely a narcissist. And
Mm-hmm.
she was with this person for decades. And it took her, I think, about a year to a year and a half of therapy just to finally tell him no and
Wow.
push back. That's how wound up her life was in his control, because he refused to allow any kind of rebuttal against anything that he told her to do. So if he said, you can go to the grocery store, but you have to get this much money worth of groceries to the penny. You know,
Wow.
you can't go over. You cannot go over even by 1 penny. You can go under, but you can't go over. And that was her life. She would have to come back from the grocery store. They had more than more than 6 children,
Wow.
and she had to live by this crazy stringent budget and all these crazy rules. And it took so long, but finally one day she, like you're talking about, she built up
Mm-hmm.
her inner self and her self-worth and her warrior spirit
Mm-hmm.
enough to where when he said, you cannot hire somebody to paint the house, absolutely not. And she looked at him and said, I am going to hire somebody to paint the house.
Wow.
And she said it took everything in her, because the punishment was so severe. He would withhold love. He would ignore and not speak to her, not touch her, no physical love, no nothing for weeks if she went against his rules. And that made her even more hungry for love and attention. It was horrible.
Wow.
So I just wonder, like, how do you help your clients? There usually are repercussions, right? This person will eventually realize that you are becoming stronger and that they give up. But in the meantime, they're going to employ some pretty severe tactics a lot of the times, right? How do you help these women understand that these are just games and not to give in to the punishment that comes?
I've worked with some people that were just entrenched. I mean, there's one person I was talking to about cycling between kindness and cruelty. Because the person would, just viscerate the person emotionally and then be kind and then do it again and be kind. And this had gone on for years and years and years. And they were starting to stand up. And it's like, how do I prevent going to that place where I just feel at the bottom of myself? How do I prevent that from happening? And I explained, like, this is a game. You're thinking, I can work on this, I can go to couples counseling, I can do these things, and it's gonna get better. But they were starting to realize it's not getting better either. So all these kind of like dead end experiences. And so I taught this person, like, when you feel like you're getting to that point, you have to realize that this is that person's junk, not yours. You know, don't play the game. Don't swallow the bait. And I think they got it. It's not like it's going to happen over time, but I think when you start to realize that, wait a second, I don't want to carry this guilt. It's heavy. It's too much for me and it's pushing me backwards. Cuz when I was in therapy, you know how with narcissists you remember things that don't make sense, right? And you kind of file it in the back of your mind. So I had these situations that made no sense to me, but I carried a lot of guilt for them. And I brought it to my therapist and we would unpack it. We would unpack each one. And almost without fail, she would say, that's your parents' issues. It's not yours. And it started to click, like, oh, so I can let this go because it's not me. So I use that to help my clients because, it goes for every narcissist. They're thrashing you for their stuff because they can't handle any criticism. So it's convenient to dump it all on, kind of like relieving yourself, right? Like they're kind of pooping on the victim. They feel better and you feel like crap. So
Yeah,
I,
and you
I
can't separate the truth from the lie. You can't separate it because they do such a great job because they're like
oh
lawyers,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
do such a great
Mhm.
job convincing you that either you caused it, you are the
Mhm.
problem, or that you're literally crazy because you're not seeing anything in reality.
Right. Or they just you get in an argument and they twist it up so bad you can't figure it out because it's a game. When they get in arguments with you, the purpose is to create distress. They
Hmm.
want you to get upset because that makes them feel superior. It's called narcissistic feeding. So that's why things like gray rocking, agreeing with everything even though you don't, because then they'll have nothing to put their hooks in.
And then meanwhile, you're also getting healthier internally so that you're understanding what they're actually doing to you.
Mm-hmm.
So many people don't know these little tactics. They don't know the flying monkeys. They don't know gaslighting.
Right,
They don't, you
right.
know, and maybe they even have heard the terms, but they don't know what it looks like in their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just completely confused, not understanding that he is pulling all these infinite tricks from his hat,
Yeah.
to make you feel constantly that it's you. And the minute that you finally understand that, wait, this is bullcrap. Like that right there
Mhm.
is bullcrap. They switch the game.
Yeah, they do.
They do. And then
Uh-huh.
all of a sudden they're playing a new game. Maybe it's the
Uh-huh.
love bombing game. Maybe they've always been mean and hateful and withdrawing of their love and attention to you. And all of a sudden they flip and they're love bombing and they're buying you flowers and they're
Mm-hmm.
taking you out on little dates and they're doing the things that you always complained about. And they
Well,
completely flip the game. And then now you're just literally still being manipulated in a different way.
Right.
But you're starving for that attention. And so you're so glad maybe, and you think they're changing. They're getting better.
Mm-hmm.
well, and I
Because
don't think people really know that they know that their relationship isn't well, but I don't think really people become savvy of all these terms and everything until they're completely out and on the healing end of things. Even
yeah,
though we would like to think they do, but I think we're just now getting to the point where people are getting educated, but it's people that have come out of these dark spots, it seems like, that are educating everybody else too. And,
mhm,
I think the key is the more we hopefully spread awareness with this stuff, then
yeah.
fewer people will not have these problems in their marriages or committed relationships because they'll know.
Because I'll just say this, maybe to prevent further relations with narcissists, but one of the first red flags is you feel crazy when you're with them, or you feel crazy for suggesting anything's wrong. That's one of the first red flags you see. If you feel that, run for the hills. You don't want to get involved with people like this. Another thing is the lack of empathy. That is a big red flag, and it's hard to notice, especially when they're in the love bombing stage. But if you're crying and you're upset and they look poker faced, that's not a good sign, because with the narcissist, they don't care about you, they don't validate you, and you're gonna suffer so much aloneness in the relationship that you'll know this person has no empathy or very little. So those are some preventative measures that people can take, or at least, spread the word, increase the awareness, because I think the big problem is we have no consensus on the definition. We know about narcissists and what they do, but there's no consensus on what is narcissistic abuse. And that is a travesty, because the damage this is doing, from children to adults to families to couples. I mean, missing work, not, it's just horrible. And that's why I think it's so important that I'm so happy I came across the definition I did, because it really opens your eyes to the extent that this person is a illusionist. This person is adept at, playing with your head. I'll just talk about this one thing, but When I realized that my dad was a narcissist, the next thing I realized was he brainwashed me. I looked at the tactics and I was like, oh my gosh, he did that. One of the tactics that narcissists use, that they use in prisoner of war camps, is the cycling between kindness and cruelty. That's a really effective strategy because it's highly addictive. It keeps you in the hamster wheel. And when you're like trying so hard to please the narcissist, even when you get out of it, you're prone towards people pleasing. You're prone towards perfectionism. And you have to work on that because that's a residue of working so hard to please a narcissist. But that is a tactic that I think a lot of them use, right? You just get in that cycle, and they give you that little spark of hope that they're gonna change, and then you take the bait, and then they don't change, and before you know it, years have passed. And to me, the worst damage, maybe the worst damage they do, is they derail you from your destiny. Because I met so many domestic violence victims that put their dreams and their hopes and passions on the shelf only to be centered on the narcissist and their needs. And that is horrible.
Wow, that is so well said. 100% agree with that. I think one thing you look back on, when you've been with a narcissist for a very long time, like for me, 27 years.
Wow.
And for Lizzie, I think a total between the two is how many years, Lizzie? Like 27 probably as well?
No, 21.
20, well, between the two.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. 21. 14 with
21
my
between the
first,
two. Okay.
26 with the second. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So 21 total for Lizzie, 27 for me. And I think, and I know I hear this a lot from women that follow us, that they're so angry because they just wasted so many years of their life in this state. And then, of course, when you have children with this person, you bring your children into this state.
Right.
And then they're trying to be healthy adults and they grew up in dysfunction. They don't even know what healthy is or what it looks like. And it's just so devastating, the after effects being with a person like this. So yeah, I love what you said. That's one of the hardest parts, is just that your life could have looked so different. It could have been so much better, which is why Lizzie and I really hope and pray that people listen to these episodes and either they get out before they have children or while their children are young or before, hopefully never get into a relationship like this. Hopefully, like, that's the best case scenario, is you start to really understand not only the red flags in the other person, but the red flags in you. You know, who are you choosing? What are you settling for? What are you saying is okay? Or, yeah, if, there's all these reasons they do these things, but, it's because they have such and such disorder, or it's because they're just not mature yet, or they've never been loved. They had all kinds of problems as a child. They had such a horrible, abusive childhood. And if somebody loves them, they will change, and that person's going to be me. And we just bombard ourselves with all these lies in order to justify their behavior, not realizing that we are going to end up being their victim, plain and simple.
Maybe we could kind of talk a little bit about how the victims themselves make themselves vulnerable. Like, well, they call it suicidal empathy. We're taught, especially as women, feel sorry. Don't let anybody go. If you suffer for the person, it's justified. That kind of mentality is dangerous. And we have to be way more wise and discerning, because I really think part of the reason I got with my ex was I thought the same thing. You know? Oh, and he was abused. Did you notice that a lot of narcissists, they will say that in the beginning? They will give their abusive history. So then you're hooked. Then you're like, when it gets hard, oh, but he suffered so much, and oh, I can't stand that. But I think, you know, narcissists tend to go for the empath. They tend to go for the giving person because they lack empathy and it probably makes them look better. But it's like, as empaths, as caring people, we need to be way more wise and discerning about who we let in our lives. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, because, even with histories of abuse and stuff, we tend to like, oh, yeah, that's a red flag, but he's okay. We just brush it aside, and we need to pay attention because our gut is our security system.
Yeah, exactly. And we can bypass the gut so easily when we're
Yeah,
empaths. Or like you
yeah.
said, justify, yeah, yeah, he's got some problems. Yes, he's got some issues, but this is why. He's got issues for a
Mhm.
really good reason, and he's dealing with them, and we're going to deal with them together as a couple. And you're right. We can be just as toxic in
Yeah,
justifying their behaviors and justifying how they treat us and
yeah.
somehow minimizing the bad and elevating the good.
Mhm.
Any little good thing they do gets 100
Mhm.
points,
Yeah.
but when they're cruel and hateful, right? And just tear you apart,
Mhm.
well, that only gets 10 points because you came home late and they didn't feel well and you didn't have dinner on time. So you did all these things to deserve it. So I did that for the whole time. I elevated the good things he did and I minimized the awful things he did and always had a reason why he did that. And then, of course, being a person who believes in God, then that came in and that became another reason to stay
Oh,
and to believe, you know what I mean? To
mhm.
believe that
Yeah.
this was for a reason and that God was going to heal us. And, then when you throw that in, it goes on a whole nother rabbit trail.
Mhm.
It just becomes like an absolute disaster mess. It's crazy.
Because I stayed with my ex because I believed divorce was wrong.
Yeah,
But
same.
it took me a year. It took me a year because my therapist was talking to me, my friends were talking to me. But it took a year for me to finally understand that yes, God hated divorce, but he
Yeah.
also hated seeing his kids abused. It
Yes.
finally clicked. Yeah.
And
Yes, exactly. That's where I think, especially if you're a Christian or any kind of faith that believes in God,
Hmm.
sacrificing yourself
Yeah.
and taking one for the team are
Mm.
good, righteous things to do,
Right, right. Yep.
right?
Hmm.
But we can get that real messed up and confused with you're going to let your child take this kind of treatment? Are you going to let them take that kind of treatment and just say that it's a godly, righteous thing to take it? No, you wouldn't let your child, you wouldn't let anybody do that to your
No,
child.
no.
Yeah.
Because
which
I
makes, I think,
realized. Oh, go ahead, Lizzie.
oh, I
It's
was
a.
going to say, I think that's what makes the process of leaving so much longer sometimes when you have your faith based or your beliefs. Obviously, we
Uh-huh.
talk about when your beliefs kind of get
Uh-huh.
us stuck in these patterns. So yeah,
Yeah,
it definitely makes it harder.
it's that suffering thing.
Yeah.
Because I was, at some point, I started thinking about grandiosity in the empath. Because the empath has grandiosity. I read an article that there isn't much difference between a narcissist and an empath, except I think it was the lack of empathy. So that got me thinking because I really believe that my love for my ex had the power to heal him. And I thought, wow, that is grandiose, right?
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's so true. It's so,
right,
especially, and again, when you believe in God, it adds even more power to that
right,
thought
right.
because you truly believe that God hates divorce. He
Mm-hmm,
does not want you to break up your family or your marriage.
mm-hmm.
Therefore, if you do everything you're supposed to do, then God will come and heal the relationship,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what God does. And meanwhile, you take it and take it and take it and take it. And I've met several ladies that hate God. They're mad at God. They leave the
Oh,
faith altogether because
oh.
You know what I mean? Because they put their faith in God to
Right,
protect them
right.
because they did everything right. They prayed for their husband. They were
Gosh.
good people and went
Mhm,
to church or whatever, did all the things they thought they were supposed to do. And, God didn't take care of it. So it really can profoundly affect people's faith too, because they are, again, that toxicity creates this false narrative or grandiosity, like you said,
But I also,
that if you do everything right, Lizzie, you do everything
yeah.
right, God's going to heal it.
Well, but I also think too that some victims, when they get out of these, they don't want to go back to their religion or faith because they feel like the people that should have protect them the most from these abusive
Oh,
relationships
uh-huh,
kept feeding them, how important the marriage is, how you need to stick it through,
uh-huh,
love them deeply and they'll change.
uh-huh,
So I feel like
uh-huh,
some people feel like they've been abandoned by people who should have been
mhm.
there at the front with them.
Yeah, or betrayed because that pastor said that this was really a good man, just caught in a web, needs lots of mercy and love. I got that counsel all the time.
Uh-huh,
All the time. Go to someone who is wiser and more knowing than you, who you feel kind of has like a sort of a lifeline to heaven, so to
uh-huh.
speak,
Yeah,
because that's
yeah.
their profession.
Uh-huh,
And then they just pat your abuser on the head and feel bad for them and tell you to pray more or do more. And so it just, oh my goodness, the layers and layers and layers of confusion are incredible, which is why therapy is so important. And I'm
uh-huh.
so grateful, Catherine, that you do what you do,
Well, thank you.
because so many people could never untangle that mess because they don't have the right voices that see the big picture, that have zoomed out, that see what's really happening and can give them truth.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you know, the truth will set you free, right?
That's
But
right.
there's so little truth because if we've chosen a narcissist, it's very likely that many people in our family are also narcissists because that's what we're comfortable with,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So you're
true.
not getting great advice from mom or your
Uh-huh.
sister unless you have someone that's uniquely healthy in that situation.
Because, my life is a testament to what God can do. Because I experience, I watch my parents constantly fighting, with my dad being a narcissist. I watched my mom break down in tears. And one time, my brother and I were sitting in the back seat, and I said, "Are you guys gonna get a divorce?" Because, I guess my friends had talked to me, but they were like, "No, we're not gonna get a divorce." But I get it. And the thing is, you know, that would be parental narcissistic abuse. And then I went through it with my ex. And then I went through it with my job. But God will use everything we go through for your good. I'm standing here because of that. And just because you've been with a narcissist, it's almost like, I don't know. I hate to say it in a positive light, but it's like you kind of get stripped down, right, to the real you and who you really are. And that, I don't know, God has a way of using it. And like, I'm not the same person. And I don't think you guys are the same person. And it's because you persevered. You had hope. You dug yourself out of that hole. And it's like you wouldn't want to go back to the person you were before the narcissist.
And I think
So,
that's where the passion comes from too. You're like
uh-huh,
so
yeah,
passionate because you've gotten out of this. And yes, it could be, God was there the whole time, probably telling us it was okay to leave.
uh-huh,
But yeah, and I think that's probably why all three of us are sitting here at the mic having these conversations.
Yeah. I don't regret any of it. The only thing I regret is how it affected my children because I feel, as a mom, you feel that you unintentionally expose your children to harm's way and then they have to now deal with that as adults, and that's something that is really hard to carry. Now my kids thankfully are have been very mature and forgiving about where it was, but you just really don't want to expose anybody else. But for myself personally, I mean, I can't believe what God's done with my life since
Yeah.
then. I am absolutely amazed at my
Mhm.
life today. It is incredible, and I wouldn't have this life if I hadn't gone through what I went through. So I am extremely grateful. I see God in everything now.
Mhm.
I understand why I went through it. And they say you don't have a testimony until you have a test. And
Mm.
it was a crazy test. And so I do. It's that interesting question of I never would have asked this for myself, and I never would want this for anybody
Right.
else.
Right.
But if you're in this situation, you have to understand that there is still purpose. Even if you made a mistake and end up with the wrong person, I swear God will just use it. He will use it if you give it to him and don't get bitter and hateful, you
Yeah,
know?
I think that's the key, because then you can still hear him.
Yeah.
It's just really hard when the mask falls off, right? And
Hmm.
you realize, oh my gosh, what did I do? I remember that so clearly. And then I felt like either I'm going down or he's going down, and I'm not going down. I remember telling myself because I was so depressed. And I thought that's it. I really got the sense of how much the devil hates us in my marriage.
Oh,
Wow. Yeah.
right? It's
Right?
like you're married,
Yeah.
being married to the devil.
Yeah. So you guys experienced it too.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
the Matadoras in the bowl. Yeah. There you
Hmm.
Well, isn't it kind of like looking into the face of evil and you're
go.
surprised you survived?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that, yeah.
Yeah. Like, how am
Really,
I
truly,
standing now?
truly, no, truly, honestly, like you look back and you're like, wow, I was really protected in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
Because, I mean, things could have been so, so much worse. And yeah, yeah, so grateful. So very grateful.
Because I remember when my marriage was, falling apart, well, it was pretty much done. And I saw God's hand, and he was putting his hand into the muck, the ashes, and I thought, God, don't put your hand in there. It's so gross. And he put his hand in there and he pulled out jewels. I felt like
Oh,
he was telling me, no, this is the result, not the junk. And
oh.
I
So
think he does
something,
that for all of us, right?
oh, 100%. That whole beauty for ashes scripture is so true. It
Mhm.
really is. Like you can have the most beautiful life. And I don't think you even realize how incredibly beautiful your life is until you've gone through something. You just, I think as humans, we just don't understand really what we have. But when you go through something and then, and God turns it around and just gives you this beautiful promised land situation, it's just incredible. Yeah.
You just have to go through this gnarly part.
I know, but boy, does it give us tools to help
Oh
other
yeah.
people, right? We wouldn't have any of that. I mean, just a textbook alone, it doesn't give you really
No.
anything.
And all this stuff about the narcissist does this and this and this. It's like
Hmm.
it's head knowledge, but it doesn't
Yeah,
really help.
right, exactly. Like when you go to somebody that you're trying to get help from, they've never been through something like this.
Yeah.
It is extremely difficult for them to understand because you could even talk about the behaviors of your ex and they could even say, well, that doesn't seem so bad. Or, well, maybe,
Right.
maybe you are, and they don't get it. They don't understand. And
Mhm.
but when you've been through it, you have this camaraderie with anybody else that's been through it and you get it. You know how
Mhm.
they feel and you know why that they're behaving the way they are. Why maybe they're even acting in reactive abuse, you
Yep.
know?
Yep.
They feel like they're going crazy and they're being screaming and yelling and doing things they never did before.
Mhm.
And you get it. And it's just a wonderful thing.
I wanted to ask you guys, how did you figure out that you were with a abuser?
Well,
Just out of curiosity.
yeah, so that's a great question. I think it's like you don't know they're an abuser.
Uh-huh.
You just know there's something
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
you know there's something wrong, and you know that your marriage is not like other people's marriage. But then you always hear people complaining about their marriage, so you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess
Yeah.
it's not abnormal to have problems in the marriage. But definitely mine and Lizzie's shared ex was a sex addict, and so there were all kinds of sexual indiscretions happening, and that's wrong, and you know that's messed up, but you just have no clue what to do about it. You
Right.
don't know where it's coming from. This is in the 80s, so sex addict wasn't even a word back then.
Mhm.
People just say, like, well, you need to have more spice in the bedroom. He's craving more. Things like that. There was so much out there that was false. But you know there's something wrong. You just can't categorize it. I just knew he had a sexual addiction, and he just wouldn't. He'd be good for a couple years even, or seemingly, and
Wow.
super repentant, and super in church, and doing everything he could to be a better person, and all these things that he would do, which always gave me hope. But it wasn't until afterward, when I looked back at the yelling and the threats and manipulation and the financial abuse that kept us dead broke, all the time. It wasn't until I looked back that I was like, this is abuse. And it was
Wow.
such a huge revelation that I just didn't see. It just he was a problem child, and I was the one trying to help him fix it. That's kind of how it was.
What about you, Lizzie?
Well, I think I had a different ex than Dina in some ways because I think he went through so much therapy before he came to me that he learned how to play the game a little better.
Oh,
But with
wow.
my first marriage, I went through severe emotional and religious abuse.
Oh,
And
gosh.
that it got to the point, I mean, I couldn't do anything like without condemnation, judgment, critical. He'd follow me around the house and preaching how I'm just a horrible child of God. I mean, it was constantly, I was called Jezebel. I was told that, the dog is more behaved than I am, kind of thing. And, but we had some good days, but then it got to the point where I'm like, I can't take it one more day. It just, that kind of abuse just,
Lizzie, did you realize in that first marriage that you were being abused?
well, I kind of did, but it took a little while. But I think the last 6 years, I knew I was being verbally abused. But it seemed like, okay, go back to the church, get counseling with people in the church, people saying marriage is forever. And he knew, because his dad was
Oh,
also a
man.
pastor, he knew how to play the game, So it's
Oh,
like, and people are like, he really seems repentant, maybe really work on this or this when you react, or, so it's just, it was a constant cycle. And it got to the point where it was guilt, it was shame that kept me there. And I just snapped one day and just said, I'm done. And yeah, that was
really?
another act of Congress to get rid of him. But yeah, it was pretty horrible. So when I started seeing red flags with Rex, our shared ex, it was so much easier for me to go, no, I mean, like, it was one and done. I didn't leave. I didn't come back 6, 7 times. It was one and done. I'm done. I don't
Oh,
need to know I don't like this particular roller coaster to know I'm not going to get back on it.
okay.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah,
that,
get more wise.
yeah, I find it hard. I think the hardest part for me was to give up. Like okay, this isn't gonna work. It was really hard to give up. Did you struggle with
Very.
that? Yeah, like
Oh
it's
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
almost like a failure, cause in grad school I learned if the woman gives up on the relationship, it's over.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
and yeah, it was still hard.
It
Oh
was.
yeah. Oh yeah, because you're not just like doing something positive for yourself. You're throwing away like all the hopes and dreams you had with this person.
Right.
You're throwing away the future that you dreamed. You're throwing away the good times, the sweet times. The You're throwing all that away. And I mean, for me, I worried that, man, I invested so much time and effort in counseling and therapy in this person,
Hmm.
and now the kids are getting older, and now I throw it away. What if he starts to get better, and what if things get better? And then he becomes a better person. And then I threw all this away prematurely. But yeah, it's ending a relationship is really counterintuitive. It's not something simple when you're a good person who is an empath. And you think of all the people that are going to be affected, and you just think about you're killing something, really. You're really killing something and burying it. And you're right. For a long time when I would try to leave, which I did many, many times, I would just feel so guilty. Like I was the one that was doing something wrong. It was horrible.
We hope you enjoyed our time with Katherine Miura today. So let's go ahead and talk about 6 key points that we talked about during our podcast. First, narcissistic abuse is about controlling your perception of reality, not just controlling your actions. Second, victims are often stronger than they realize. Narcissists manipulate because they fear losing control. Third, boundaries are essential to rebuild confidence and self-respect after emotional abuse. 4, red flags like love bombing and lack of empathy should never, ever be ignored. 5, healing requires breaking the trauma bond and reconnecting with your true self. And finally, faith can be weaponized to keep victims trapped. Reclaim your spiritual connection from toxic people. If you found today's conversation with Katherine Miura meaningful, be sure to check out episode number 45, Narcissistic Abuse, How to Recover and Heal, Strategies for Survivors. It's packed with powerful and practical tools, insights, and encouragement for anyone navigating the aftermath of a toxic relationship. We are so glad that you came here today and listened to the Matadoras No More Bull podcast, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.